Welcome to the podcast where today's episode, Switch to Specs. Once again, welcome to the Deep End, our captivating discussion series where we dive into the depths of current Pokemon news and theories, and today we're tackling the rumors of the Switch 2 specs that have come out this week. I don't want to call them leaks because nothing is confirmed until it is confirmed by official Nintendo sources. So let's dive into it. This week, we were treated to some potential information regarding the Switch 2. We've got some specs, some preliminary images, as well as a couple of YouTubers showing off what they believe are going to be the system specs, as well as the system itself.
As of recording, the 3D files, quote-unquote prototypes, have been out for about 2-3 days. It is quite interesting because looking at these 3D files, it doesn't seem like much has actually changed. It does follow the normal Nintendo console progression where, the console gets bigger and the edges get more rounded and smoother. I mean, think of the Nintendo DS Lite and the Nintendo, I believe it was the DSi. The DSi's corners were a lot more rounded and softer. Although, this time, as far as we know, there is no second screen, which has also sort of been a staple for Nintendo handhelds. Think Game Boy Advance to Game Boy Advance SP, Nintendo Wii to Wii U. So it'll be interesting to see what people think about it. The 3D files for this console are actually sized in such a way that the Switch 2, or whatever it's going to be called, is a lot bigger than the Switch and, its sort of revisions, including the OLED Switch. And it's not something that you can really see until it's actually printed out, which there was a YouTuber, I'm not sure exactly where she's from. It is one of the Asian countries, but I can't place the language. I'm not very good at languages, but although her video is in a foreign language, it's very well presented, and she actually, from those 3D models, she must have gotten her hands on the STLs somehow. She printed the whole thing out, obviously, so she could show what the outside looked like, because, we're not going to know what's really inside and how it looks inside until it's been released.
The YouTuber in question, I did go to her video. I started watching it. I took the characters that were on screen, and according to Google Translate, it is Chinese, so I'm going to assume that she is Chinese. And she goes by the name of Xiao Ningza XYZ, according to Google Translate. So if I mispronounce that, I apologize profusely. But she does do a wonderful breakdown of the specs, and she's got her 3D printed version of what the Switch 2 may look like. I will put her video in the description below, so be sure to give it a watch. It was presented well. Before we even get into this part, I have to admit that part of me wants to see Nintendo pull something off. Now, this was reported to us by our Mudkip newsie, Nick. Shout out to Nick there, great job. So there's a Twitter account called Heed, and they posted a little gif of Nintendo if they wanted to make $1 trillion, and all they did was rotate the screen 90 degrees and slap the Joy-Cons on the sides, and they displayed the DS setup with the dual screens. And I have to admit, yeah, that would be amazing if they did that.
No, it would be. I just had a look at it, and actually, if they really wanted to make money, you'd have to do that. However, keep it on the Switch, but get the DS emulator, and the only way to use it would be that vertical orientation. But then again, we do need, in my opinion, touch functionality back into the games, because I feel like that's what made Nintendo handheld, or at least from when I was growing up, quintessentially Nintendo handheld.
One of the first things that she does is she does a size comparison with the current Switch, I believe the OLED, compared to her 3D printed model of what are believed to be the specs of the Switch 2. And it looks like it's going to be roughly the same size as far as the unit goes, except it looks like you would add, it's got about the size of another Joy-Con off to the side. So if you can picture your Switch and then just add the space of another Joy-Con, That's your width. However, that screen size by comparison is absolutely massive. You're going from a 7-inch to an 8-inch, which doesn't sound as much, but when you're looking at it on a picture, that is a big screen.
It is quite big, and in the video she does compare it to a Steam Deck, and it being slightly bigger than a Steam Deck is actually quite impressive.
Damn, it's only 1 inch bigger? What?
Even the size of a PS4.
No, that looks more than 1 inch bigger.
Well, I think the inch is by diagonal, so it's higher and wider.
They're using some pretty, they're going to use some pretty beefy components in it, and if they can keep that weight down and still have it perform pretty decently, then I think they're going to be onto a winner.
Agreed. Even the Joy-Cons are bigger. As far as we can tell, they look the same as far as layout goes. I'm just hoping that they take into account the drift issue. I'm hoping that has been addressed or fixed, minimized something, because if we're going to go through the whole drift issue all over again with the Switch 2, I think that in itself is going to be a massive problem.
Hate spending another $80+ to buy a new set of controllers.
Yeah, that's where I turned around and I mentioned Gillikit. My Gillikit controller. I've got a King Kong 2, and it's been phenomenal. Not getting paid for this, but Gillikit has some good stuff.
Yeah, so again, we did chat about this a little bit offline before we started, but with the bigger form factor and other manufacturers going with Hall effect joysticks, I think there is potential that we could get Hall effect joysticks or something of a similar quality. And
so moving along in our discussion was the fact that the Switch 2 allegedly has a dual fan setup. Now, this is going to kind of bring up a very important thing that most people are probably wondering. If you're running dual fans because the system's going to run that hot, what is the power consumption? What is the battery life? And at this point in time, I do not believe that we actually have that information or any inkling of that information. That was one of the concerns when I had mentioned this to a few other people. Is, if it's got a dual fan, that's going to be insane on the battery. It's going to be draining quite quickly. So what's the life? What's the battery life? Because if the battery life is going to suck, then nobody's going to want to play it handheld, for those people who do prefer to play handheld over docked.
So that's the thing, right? So there's going to be a lot of high draw components. So you've got the new CPU, the better graphics on the CPU, because they're going to have to be integrated graphics. You've now got an SSD. Obviously, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the screen resolution is higher, so you've got more draw from the screen. And you would think, bigger console means bigger battery, and they're going to try and squeeze as much battery into that space as they can. At the end of the day, this is Nintendo we're talking about. They might give us a 2 milliamp hour battery.
Free battery pack.
Maybe that's what the USB at the top is used for.
Speaking of the USB at the top, the system does allegedly have 2 USB-C ports. And of course, we all know that when you dock the system, there's the USB-C port that's down there. And that's how the base will transfer the images from from the Switch itself to your whatever screen you've plugged it into. Now, one of the speculations that this YouTuber actually posted was, perhaps there's a camera function where you can actually plug in a USB-C camera. But also, what if this was in part a way for Nintendo to give you an option for exporting to your, say, computer? This would help a lot of streamers who tend to do Let's Plays. And I think if that's the case for that second USB-C, I think that would be an incredible thing for Nintendo, especially as far as popularity goes. Not popularity, but promotion goes. That means that less people will need to buy a capture card, and more people can just plug in their system to a computer and start playing and stream directly from any computer that they want. Without having to purchase a capture card.
I think that'd be kind of interesting, because that means either Nintendo will release some kind of client program alongside the Switch 2 so that you can do stuff like that, or they would make it OBS compatible, I guess. You'll be able to pick it up itself, right? Because I think most of the time, if you're using OBS, you need something to act like that medium, right? So I guess that'd be kind of interesting if they did it that way. I mean, if that's the reason for it. I mean, that definitely makes things a lot easier, ease of access, or like maybe you're just missing the dot, right? And then now you have that option. You're gonna end up using both USB-C ports, like one going straight to your computer. I don't know, maybe if it has a charging function attached to that as well, or if it's just gonna, just use it just for an output device kind of thing. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think, with the potential for there to be like a camera accessory, what if you could stream directly from the Switch? Obviously, then you could have face cam if you have the camera, or it could work like the other consoles, you stream directly through it. Maybe they might be able to add Discord or something, so then you can share your screen and stream it to your friends that way.
I was actually going to mention that. I mean, one of the biggest complaints that we constantly hear, especially when it comes to games like Pokemon, is there used to be a way to record your battles and then stream them to your friends, which we haven't had since Gen 7, I believe.
Yeah.
And so it was one of the big complaints is that there's no spectator mode in a lot of the games that people want to see spectator mode in. So if this is a way to output the video or the output gameplay from your Switch to your computer, it's a great way to set up a spectator mode via apps like Discord. And I think that would be an insanely great idea. It would also make the system a lot more popular than it already is.
On the note of accessories, please, if there is anyone from Nintendo watching, please make proper accessories and not just cardboard kits that you have to put together. I'm tired of explaining to people why I've got cardboard in boxes in plastic tubs in my garage.
Actually, I think I know the secret to the top port USB now. I got it. Nintendo is reintroducing link cables.
Oh my god.
No. You know what the second port is for? You can connect the second screen on there and start playing DS games.
You can connect your Switch 1 to the Switch 2.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, that would actually be interesting to see.
That'll make things easier if I'm transferring my data over.
There is one port I want to touch on quickly that sort of obscured by her finger, and that's a nifty little round port next to the cartridge slot. The aux port is coming back, which, I'm always for an aux port because I like using wired headphones, but I wonder if they'll give it Bluetooth connectivity, because, most people nowadays have a pair of either wireless headphones or wireless earbuds.
I've got a pair of my wireless Bluetooth headphones connected to the Switch already. The Switch is Bluetooth capable, so the Bluetooth headphones connect to it.
I always think about that.
Really?
Yeah. Y'all never tried it?
I've been missing out my entire life that I've had the Switch.
The Switch will do Bluetooth connection.
I tried it once.
The base Switch, like the first gen?
Yeah.
They added it in an update, and I remember trying it, and it wasn't too great because you couldn't move too far away from your Switch.
I've been missing out all these times. All these times when wired headphones are broken. I could have been doing it Bluetooth. Oh my god.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a trick to setting them up, but it can be done. One of the things that a lot of people are looking forward to is that backwards compatibility when it comes to Switch 2, which I think Nintendo has pretty much solidified that is a popular feature in any of their systems when it comes to similar styles. Obviously, the Switch is not backwards compatible with any previous system. Most of the systems going back as far as the Super Nintendo had some form of backwards compatibility between one system or another. The Super Nintendo had the Super Game Boy, which allowed you to play Game Boy games on the Super Nintendo system. Then, of course, you had the generation, the technology jump where we got the Game Boy Advanced, which pretty much every Game Boy or handheld iteration moving forward was backwards compatible with the previous generation, as the same with the consoles where your GameCube games were compatible with your Wii was compatible with the Wii U, and it wasn't until the advent of the Switch where they're funneling everything into one console as opposed to spreading their eggs into different baskets. But however, it looks like that Nintendo's going to keep that innovation of backwards compatibility moving forward with the Switch and Switch 2.
They better. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, they better. Don't forget, the GameCube, a disc-based home console, also had an adapter for Game Boy games, as well as the ability to use your Game Boy as a controller.
This is true. This is true.
Oh yeah.
Another thing that they do bring up into the respects is the resolution of the screens. We're finally getting 1080p as far as resolution goes.
Handheld?
I don't know if it's on handheld mode, but it's at least in dock mode.
No, apparently, so Switch 2 is going to have DLSS, which is going to upscale the 1080p to 4K in dock mode. Whether that's
okay.
or not is yet to be seen. And, we won't find this out probably until it releases, but it's always a possibility.
Well, we've been hearing a lot of rumors when it comes to the resolution for a long time now, that people who have seen the Switch 2 in action say that it's going to land somewhere between Xbox and PlayStation 5 style graphics. So
PlayStation 4 specific, I think. PlayStation 4 Pro specifically, I think. Like, between the ranges, I think.
No, the Pro wasn't even announced until when
No,
they made
PS4 Pro. PS4 Pro. PS4 Pro.
PS4 Pro, yeah. So, in this video, she shows an image in this for the Joy-Cons in itself, and I think something kind of got glossed over that I really think we should point out is when you look at the side profile of the actual Joy-Con. Not only do you still have those buttons that are synonymous with the way the Joy-Cons were designed, there was also a slot in the middle of the Joy-Con itself. And I'm kind of curious to know what those two slots are for, because you've got you obviously got your L and R buttons, what looks like an audio jack in the center, but then there's also like a slot that looks like it would be a slot for a cartridge of some sort. So I'm kind of curious to see exactly how this would work, like if this is supposed to be the actual designs of the Joy-Con itself. It just makes me kind of wonder what's going on.
Those could potentially just be, the snap-on pieces that we have on like Joy-Cons now.
Yeah.
Like if you want to use single ones, or alternatively, because of the way the center rectangle slot is sort of laid out, and obviously the other slots on the side, what if instead of just the normal grips that we get, it's just like this little adapter that you slot into one and you just connect them that way? So there's actually no physical grip, it's just a bit that goes in between them.
Maybe, but the image that she presents shows the pins, like connection pins in for like a cartridge or some kind of memory based something in the image. So that's kind of why I'm trying to figure out what could possibly be plugging in there. If it's just something for the rails or just some kind of superfluous thing, it doesn't make sense that it would have some form of connection pins or contact pins. So I'm kind of curious to find out if, number one, these are legit images, or or if this is just something that someone's throwing together. If this is the case, like what I'm looking to find out is if these are legit images. I'm really curious to find out what exactly their use is for.
I just say I am so glad the SL and SR buttons are so much bigger.
Oh yeah.
Like, I have fat fingers. I struggle with the regular Joy-Con.
Let's see. Moving forward, like the Joy-Con.
Can you skip back? Where she's showing the back of them? Do you see the same thing I'm seeing on the top set?
Well, there's the bigger connect and disconnect buttons.
That's also what I'm seeing.
Do you think that those are connect and disconnect buttons, or those could potentially be addressable buttons? Because those look a bit too big to be disconnect buttons. And if the Switch 2 is going to have the magnetic connections, you might not need to press a button to disconnect it.
That's a scary thought, though.
I think those are just probably more of a safety feature, because even if the Joy-Cons are connected via magnetic, you'd want to make sure that there's no way that the Joy-Cons disconnect on accident, because the last thing you want is a free-falling screen and you're holding a pair of Joy-Cons as you watch your Switch 2 succumb to Earth's gravity.
Even so, with those buttons being as big and as pronounced as they are, wouldn't that negate it being a safety feature? Because, you know, if you're in an intense Animal Crossing session, you might accidentally grip those and pull the Joy-Cons away.
Maybe, but if that you're hoping that you're only doing it on the one and not the both. Because as long as you've got the grip on one of them, you're fine. There's an additional button now on the right Joy-Con as opposed to just on the left, and she's got some speculations on that.
That extra button could potentially be like a Stream 2 button. Because we got the capture button and then we got the addition of that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So now she's going to go into the specs. So when you're comparing the specs of what's been rumored for the Switch 2 versus the original Switch, when you look at the Tegra chip, you're talking about something that has 256 cores with a 4 gigabyte built-in RAM, DDR4, and they had a whopping 64 gigabytes of internal memory, which any gamer will tell you is absolutely laughable, even by the standards of the original when the Switch originally came out. I mean, I went out and I got myself a 256 gig card so that I can actually put stuff on my Switch, and I don't play a lot of digital games. However, the Switch 2 allegedly runs the T239 chip, which is equivalent to the RTX 30 series of graphics cards. 1536 cores with 12 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM and 256 gigabyte SSD. So performance-wise, we're looking at something that's way beefier than the current Switch. And I'm kind of glad for that. But the one thing I have heard people talking about is 12 gigs for a gaming machine still seems a bit low. You'd think you'd want to push that as, at least a 16 minimum.
Yeah.
Just to put into perspective, although it is a lot better than the previous Switch, I'm talking specifically about the cores now and the graphics. It might be better to say that the Switch 2 is going to have the equivalent of a mobile RTX 30 series GPU, because your standard 30 series GPU has about 3,500 CUDA cores.
Oh, I see. Okay, I think I get what you mean. Okay. But I definitely gotta say, I did not know the Switch was running on just 4 gigs of memory of RAM. The heck? How is it running anything?
I mean, it's definitely going to be performing better than the PS4. That's for sure, as far as cores are considered.
Yeah.
It still feels like Nintendo is still playing catch-up when it comes to the beefiness of the actual hardware to run stuff. But it's nice to see that they're going to be able to run stuff. Anything that's running on the PS4 should, in theory, now run on the Switch 2 with ease.
It'll be interesting to see specifically, because we know Scarlet and Violet aren't the best running game on the system. I mean, especially when you compare them to something like Tears of the Kingdom. But it'll be interesting to see if those games improve performance-wise on the Switch 2, because obviously, you're bumping up the RAM, you've got a better GPU, or you got better graphics in it.
Like, I still can't believe that freaking 4 gigabyte RAM, and then now we're getting 3 times the power, PS4 Pro-ish power now. I mean, that's pretty sick. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty sick.
It's gonna be ridiculous.
Like, it's kind of like what Draco was saying earlier too. Like, Nintendo is taking a really long time, or they're taking their time with, or catching up, I should say, with with all the other systems. I mean, everybody knows the term "slow and steady wins the race." I don't think that's what Nintendo's doing, honestly. They're just really bad. They're just really trying to catch up. I guess I gotta hand it to them. Like, if these are the actual specs when the thing comes out, like, they probably just made like one of the, if not most powerful handheld systems, I think. I mean, I'm not sure what the systems are on the Stream Deck is, but I mean, if it's close to that anyways, then okay, so maybe it's, then that's pretty good.
What I'm really interested in thinking, because we know, Nintendo, the king of handheld consoles, they've had a few stinkers, like, I'm not going to deny that, but they always do handheld right. I want to see if the dock has extra functionality instead of being just an extra bit of plastic with a very small board and, a few cables.
Yeah, I'm looking at the RAM. It's for the PS4 as well, and we're definitely dealing with way more RAM. I mean, not by much, but at least 50% more RAM than a PS4.
You can't exactly compare the PS4 RAM to this new potential RAM because DDR5 is always going to be better than DDR4.
But that said, I like the fact that they're doing solid state drive at this point.
Yeah.
Wait, they're using crack and decompression? That is crazy.
Explain,
That is
please.
extremely good.
Okay,
So-
can you explain for the layman, please?
So, you know how Nintendo games tend to be very small? We'll say, for argument's sake, the majority of Nintendo games are between 8 and 16 gigabytes.
Mm-hmm.
Those games are extremely compressed to say base. So, because, I mean, the cards themselves aren't that big. The max you can go is 64 gigs. So, we'll never see a Modern Warfare 6 on a Nintendo cartridge because, you know, that's almost a terabyte of space. So in order to that, they compress all the files, make them really small, and you have to have on your chipset or on the motherboard somewhere, something to handle decompressing all of that so then it can read the files properly. And that gives you essentially a smooth gameplay experience because it's only taking the parts that it needs at that specific moment. It obviously happens very quickly. I mean, you're not going to notice it. And if I'm not mistaken, well, as far as my knowledge goes, crack and decompression, sort of more up there, things you can actually use to sort of get that whole task done.
I think one of the interesting things is now I'm wondering if this is in conjunction with what Nerd did. So Nerd, also known as the Nintendo European Research and Development Team. Great name, by the way, Nerd. So these nerds yeah, I gotta love the acronym. They knew what they were doing. But they actually did do some stuff they came up with some interesting compression rates for Breath of the Wild that allowed for them to basically almost triple the size of a game within their standard cartridges. So it makes me wonder if it wasn't in part with Kraken, if that being the case. And with that said, if they're doing that kind of level of compression, imagine what we're going to be seeing as far as games go when it comes to things like Elden Ring, which we know is a massive game.
Final Fantasy.
Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 5.
Imagine trying to run Black Myth Wukong on a Switch 2 with that kind of compression. Like, the game cards themselves, what we've seen, don't work. Wouldn't be able to fit that game. It's too big. But I know that Nintendo has had a chipset that they haven't touched yet, which were the 64 gig chips. And if they're going to compress something by 3, well, Sun Wukong would actually fit on a Nintendo card.
I mean, they could even do it as a 1 to 2 and it would fit on the 64 cards.
Yeah, that's just... So we're speculating on this, and it revolves back to the whole Micronix game cards the Switch cards themselves are based on. But that is an impressive thing if they're able to do that. Like, it gives me hope that the next Switch system is going to be that much better.
Yeah, Nintendo just gotta announce this thing already.
Yeah, right. It's just gonna boil down to, I guess, price point and naming, because Nintendo had like one of the worst naming conventions for a system, and it caused it to fail. And you know, the only reason I say one of is because Microsoft is right there at the top, because apparently they can't get past the number 1 or X.
Why say 10 when you can say X? Maybe that's where old Elon got his inspiration for Twitter's new name. Maybe he's an Xbox fanboy.
You're looking at the Switch 2 is what the fan name made is. You know, it could be the Switch NX, it could be the Super Switch, which I really kind of like that naming convention, you know? Go back to some retro. Again, price point, I mean, I'd be comfortable paying... What's the PlayStation 5 Pro going at? $700?
$700.
And that doesn't include the disc drive, which is almost another $100 more. Honestly, I'd be all right paying $500 for this for Switch. I think the system in itself, putting it on the same price point as what the PS4 went for, as for the Xbox, whatever number they were on, in that middle range, would put it just at a good price point, comparatively speaking. It gives it a competitive section, even though it can't really compete with the with the PS5, pricing it around the PS4, I think would be the smart move to go, because not only would they be undercutting Sony as far as pricing goes, it puts them at such a better light than what Sony's looking at right now, because Sony is hemorrhaging money left and right.
Look, I think with how well Nintendo consoles sell, apart from the Wii U, we don't talk about that one, that the Wii U is the forgotten middle child. I think that they could easily sell it for 450, 400 at a hopeful push.
At the end of the day, it really comes down to what is on that system before it moves. And the fact that Nintendo has been silent on a couple of things for the Switch 2 because of the pushback. I mean, we can assume that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be on Switch 2. It might even be the crossover game that Zelda was. Which, fun fact, if you don't know, Zelda Breath of the Wild sold more on Switches than they sold Switches.
Crazy.
Yeah, which is nuts. And we're coming on the 30th anniversary of Pokemon, and no one has talked about anything for Gen 10, which potentially could be a launch title for the Switch 2 if they decide to drop that on that system. And as anybody who's followed Nintendo knows, when a Pokemon game drops, whatever system that is on moves boxes. And I would expect that Nintendo would probably play to that, hopefully. But not only that, the potential of being able to drop big titles like Black Myth's Sun Wukong onto Switch 2 and plays well on that system, I think would absolutely make that system so much more desirable when it comes to choosing between a PlayStation 5 Pro or a Switch 2.
Just by the by, they could put Black Myth on the Switch now, because Ark Survival Evolved is a 275 gigabyte game that got condensed down, and it's on the Switch.
Yeah, but I think the problem is, like, games like if you play Wolfenstein, if you actually compare it to the PS4 versus the Switch version, they had to really murk down the graphics for the Switch as opposed to being able to play it in its full glory. And I think playing a game like Black Myth Sun Wukong in anything less than how it was presented on any other system is a disservice to the game, because that game is absolutely stunningly gorgeous, and if you have to water that down, it's going to take away from it.
It is beautiful. But I mean, that being said, I think what we haven't touched on is Nintendo. Again, if any of you are watching, please, stream-only games need to end. Like, look how the Stadia turned up. You don't want to end up like that. And please add functionality like the Xbox and PlayStation. Please give us a side app where we can stream games that we own, not have to stream, but we can stream games that we own from like our computers or our phones, because that would make life so nice.
Oh, actually, there is one thing I did want to touch on. One of the things that was pointed out, because my brother-in-law's a big tech head too, and he loves to look at specs. One of the things that he was talking about was the Switch's Wi-Fi, which has probably been one of the biggest items of contention when it comes to online play, where it kind of caps around 3 megabits per second, which if you're gaming, that's just terrible.
That's brutal.
You can barely stream on 3 megabits a second. Like, I'm talking about like Netflix, for example.
That's a little bit. No wonder the Rage and Scarlet and Violet are so laggy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems. And I mean, when you're talking about something that requires a lot more speed, I mean, yeah, 3 is the bare minimum. But when you're looking at something a bit more competitive, you need something a lot faster. A lot of people say that if you're into first-person shooters, if you're into a competitive game like speeds, you want at least 100 megabits per second for the reaction. So games like Smash Brothers, which you absolutely have to be precise with your attack moves, or you're just gonna get owned. That's like games like that becomes a major problem when you're only going at 3 megabits a second, And it doesn't seem like a lot when you're looking at it from the high perspective, but it's been an item of contention for Switch systems for a long time. I mean, even though the Wii U suffered from that from slow connection speeds when it came to games like Smash Brothers, which Smash Brothers has a huge following. So you absolutely need to make sure that you're catering to that.
I mean, back during the Wii, 3 megabits was like pretty decent. Like that was back when a lot of ISPs would sell you like, I don't know what it was like in the US, but here it was like 10, 15 megabits a second was like your most expensive, most premium, bestest Wi-Fi that you could get.
But I mean, it's always been a thing, and it's one of the things that I've noticed when playing games like Pokemon. Yeah, you see it, but you see it even more so when it comes to games like Smash, because that's one of the reasons why I stopped playing online with Smash. It was like I would hit the buttons, and then I would watch myself get trounced, and as I'm flying off the side of the board, there's me performing my combo while I'm flying through the air with the greatest of ease. So it definitely needs to be something that needs to be addressed, and I'm hoping that the Switch 2 will actually have that. Now, it's the one thing that we haven't actually found any information on. So, I mean, I guess with that, brings this episode to a close. Let us know what you think about the Switch 2, what the rumored specs are, your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams. Let us know in the comment section down below. Also, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. And once again, I want to just say thanks to Dao Ningza XYZ for her amazing coverage of the system based on what she has as far as specs goes. Again, links are down below. She did a fantastic job. Highly recommend watching that video. And as always, have a wonderful day. Bye.
A reaper.